In section 3.6, we're looking at critical points and extrema. So we'll start with a little vocab. First of all, critical point. So these are points on a graph at which a line drawn tangent to a curve is horizontal or vertical. You can think about it as where the function changes directions. And I put a couple examples on there for you out of the textbook, just so you can kind of see what a critical point looks like. Now, absolute max or min. When we talk about an absolute maximum or minimum, that's going to be the largest or smallest value on the entire graph over the entire domain. So when you look at the picture here, you'll notice that they have a point, the point that's on the x-axis there, is labeled as the absolute minimum. That is the lowest point on the entire graph. Okay? There's no absolute maximum on this case because there's arrows at both ends of this graph, which means the graph keeps going higher. So if you were to say that's the highest point, I could just extend that out and go even higher. So this one only has an absolute minimum. Notice this point over here is not an absolute minimum because even though it's the lowest point in this part of my graph, it's not the lowest point over the entire domain. So we also have relative max and min. So relative max and min would be the highest or lowest point in a local area of the graph. So the largest or smallest value on a given interval. So not necessarily over the entire domain, but just on a small portion of the graph. So if we look at the graph that's on your paper here, we've got a relative maximum because over this small portion of the graph, that's that highest point. We have a relative minimum because on this portion of the graph, it's our lowest point, even though we don't have an absolute max or min because this graph always goes lower and always goes higher as we go out to the left and the right. So the relative max and min is just looking at the highest or lowest point on a small portion of the graph. And then the last one that you have listed is point of inflection. And let me see if I can get this on there. So point of inflection is a critical point where the graph changes its curvature from concave up to concave down or vice versa. So you can see that this is like curving up and this part of my graph is kind of curving down. So that point where it switches its curvature is our point of inflection.